Oh, somebody's joining us. Who? What? What? Wait.
What's up, Maya?
Oh my God!
Dreams do come true.
Maya, who's joining us?
Skylar Astin to thank for this. Skylar loves you so much. I had never even met Skylar before. He reached out to me on social media and said, "Hey, man, you want to make somebody's dreams come true?" I go, "Absolutely. Whose dream?" He goes, "Maya, my friend." I said, "Yes," and here we are.
Sorry, we're Maya's fan club and yours.
How y'all doing out there?
We're doing so good.
We're so excited. Thank you for doing this.
My absolute pleasure. This is one of the easiest ways to bring smiles to people's faces, and it's one of the things I like to do the most, is make people feel seen and heard and loved, and bring them joy. And I'm honored to meet you and really meet all of you guys. Who's there in the studio with us?
My name is Chris. I'm the studio manager here at Seacrest Studio in Children's Hospital, Colorado.
Well, what's up, Chris? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. You know what? Number one, you're awesome for joining us today. Thank you for doing that. I see the smile on Maya's face. And Maya...
I see it creeping on there.
Yeah, and Maya is an amazing interviewer, and I think she might actually have some questions for you if you have a few minutes. Is that great?
Bring it, Maya.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a disclaimer. Hi, sorry, I'm Sheila, Maya's mom.
Hi, Sheila. Nice to meet you.
And Maya didn't know that this was happening, obviously, so we
we wanted to keep that a surprise.
Yeah, so we kind of wrote questions for her. So if she's not, she's a pro though, so go for it, Maya. There they are.
So who or what inspired you to become an actor?
Excellent question. I mean, to be honest, I just, like I said, I love making people feel good. I love bringing people joy. Ever since I was probably 4, around that time, I think that was the youngest age that I think we are kind of capable of being very cognizant of cause and effect, and meaning, like, I think that was the first time I was aware of the fact that I could intentionally make somebody laugh. Prior to that, I made people laugh all the time, and I had no idea how I did it. It just was an accident. And then around 4, I kind of put it all together. I was like, oh, I can do this silly thing or do a silly voice or a movement or whatever, and then that will make this other person laugh. And I knew, even at 4, you're aware that if someone's laughing, they feel good inside. You're doing a good thing for them. And so I was hooked. It was the greatest thing in the world. And then, so even though I didn't understand what acting was at the time, I was definitely performing for people. And then probably a few years later was when I was old enough to understand, oh, this is a television and those are TV shows, or this is a movie and those are actors. Those are people who pretend to be other characters in order to evoke emotion out of people, be it laughter or sometimes even tears in a drama and shining a light on something important. And so once I figured all that out and I realized that this thing that I loved doing, I could get paid for, that could be the rest of my life and be a job, that was it. There was no other option. I mean, I kicked around for a little while. It was like, well, I think I had a few options when I was a kid. Actor was always number 1. Someone who talked like Donald Duck, that was number 2. I kind of fell into the entertainment world. And then, I think Top Gun had come out around then. I wanted to be a fighter pilot for a while, but all of those things were short-lived. The thing that always stayed in me was wanting to bring, entertainment and using art to touch people. And so I haven't really given it a second thought. I have often asked myself, if acting didn't work out for me, what would I do? And I think I would probably want to be a teacher of some kind. I don't know exactly what kind, but high school history, U.S. history kicks around a lot in my mind. I just think history is very important, and those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. I think that we're kind of in one of those places right now in the world, sadly. There's a lot of things being thrown around and a lot of people not just taking a second to go like, hey guys, well, we've been through a lot of this stuff. Let's go look back on that and see how we reacted to it then and how we handled it then and how we can handle it better now. But more than anything, I just feel like we need more teachers, scholastic or spiritual or philosophical or whatever. I think we need people to take a moment and give their time and their patience and their energy and their wisdom to younger generations so that we can all flourish and work together to making a better world.
Cool.
That is so good. Hey, Maya, I got to interrupt really fast.
Yeah.
We didn't even introduce our surprise friend. So, Maya, you have to introduce who we're talking to.
That's all right. Hi, I'm John Krasinski. You might know me from The Office. Hi, it's Zachary Levi from such things as Tangled and Shazam. That's who it is. Welcome to Tom Selleck's stash these days.
Yeah, you are.
So you've been on Broadway, and actually, I know you worked with Krista Rodriguez. And
Oh, yeah.
just interviewed her a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
Yeah, and so you, what got you interested in theater?
Well, theater, as an actor, theater's the first, unless unless you have parents who really want to throw you into the jungles of Hollywood when you're a child. Unfortunately, mine did not. I don't even really think my mom had the energy. There was so many other things going on in life. Thank God. But theater is really the first outlet as an actor that normally you find. And so I found theater very early on. I did, some skit play kind of things at summer church camp when I was real young. And then in middle school was when I started doing really full organized productions. I think in sixth grade, I did Grease. I was Sonny in Grease. And then never stopped since sixth grade. And let's see, sixth grade, I was about 11. So about 30 years I've been acting in organized ways like that. And so I found theater very early on, did theater as much as I could every year from the age of 11 all the way to the age of 21-ish. So about 10 years straight of theater. And then I got my big break in TV. And then I did a lot of TV and film until I was, 2013. So until I was about 33. So 12 years later, I had a big break in theater. And then 12 years later, I got to do First Date with Krista. And that was my first Broadway show. And the first time I was on a stage in 12 years. It was terrifying and exhilarating and amazing all at the same time.
Cool. So what's your favorite Broadway show?
Oh, man. Well, of the ones that I've done, I've only done two myself. And as much as I love First Date so much, I guess I'd have to say She Loves Me was my favorite of the two. But that's mainly just because I think the show She Loves Me is so unbelievable. It's classic and timeless and, it's like a big warm hug. And, it was a really stellar production I got to be a part of. And I got nominated for a Tony and all that. So that was really fun. But of the shows that I've seen on Broadway, I don't know. I've seen so many good ones. I really liked Hadestown. I saw that. That was one of the more recent shows that I saw. I really liked Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. I saw that off Broadway before it made it onto Broadway, and that was incredible. Dear Evan Hansen was amazing. Hamilton. I don't know. Waitress. I've gotten to see a lot of really great shows. Very, very grateful for all that.
So Shazam is one of my all-time favorite movies.
You have excellent taste.
Thank you. So I love it and I watch it all the time. So if you had any of Shazam's powers, which would it be and why? Well,
personally, I think that the greatest power of Shazam is the first letter in his name. So I'm sure you were aware that Shazam is an acronym, right?
Yeah.
And the S stands for the wisdom of Solomon. And I personally value that more than anything else. Not just because I read a long time ago when I was a kid about the wisdom of Solomon and how it was because of the wisdom that he asked for that then he was able to gain all the riches of the world and become the most powerful man in the world. But I think that with wisdom comes all other things. In fact, in a cheeky way, I could say that if I had the wisdom of Solomon, there's a good chance I could build a super suit similar to like Iron Man that would then give me all of the other powers that Shazam has. I would have the strength of Hercules and the stamina of Atlas and the power of Zeus and the courage of Achilles and the speed of Mercury, all rolled up into a super suit that I could build because I had the wisdom of Solomon. So that's what I would go with.
Cool. I loved Chuck. What was your favorite part of playing Chuck Bartowski?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. I liked it too. It was a hard show though. That was a tough show to make because every episode was like shooting an 80s action movie every week. I didn't have very much time or money to do it. But I have such fond memories, and that whole family is still very, very dear to me. And I can't wait till maybe we get to make a Chuck movie one day. I'm still working on that. But I would say my favorite thing about Chuck, the character, is his heart. I just think that he cared. He cared more about people than himself. He even cared about the bad guys. He wouldn't shoot them. He would do everything he could to not end their life and to give them grace beyond that. It chokes me up just thinking about it.
So you played Flynn Rider in Tangled.
Oh yeah. Some know me as Eugene Fitzherbert, but that's all right.
So what's your favorite song from Tangled?
Well, I mean, I guess I kind of have to say At Last I See the Light, because that's really the only, other than my little blurb in I Have a Dream, I really only have one song in the movie, and it's such a beautiful song and such a beautiful moment in the movie and the lanterns and all of that. And Mandy and I got to sing it at the Oscars. I mean, it's such a beautiful song. But as far as my favorite song, I think, might be Mother Gothel's Mother Knows Best. I just think it's so funny. I think Glenn Slater and Alan Menken just outdid themselves with the layers of humor and cadence. And Donna, what's Donna, who played Mother Gothel? I'm totally blanking on Donna's last name, but at any rate, I think she just crushed it. It's so nuanced and so funny, and I love it. But I love them all. I think it's just a fantastic movie with a great soundtrack all around.
Murphy.
Cool.
Donna Murphy!
Okay, I have to be honest, kind of my short-term memory. I got really confused why you just said Murphy. And it took me a second to realize. I was like, why are you just randomly saying Murphy?
It's okay. I was confused why I randomly said Murphy as well. So we're all in the same boat.
So has there been a character that one character you've played that you've related to the most?
I feel like I can relate to all of them at least a little bit. I think as an actor, you're always drawing upon your own experiences and your own emotion and hopefully your own empathy to inhabit these characters, even the bad ones. There's a great quote that every villain is the hero of their own story. So I think there's a little bit of me in all of them, probably, but Chuck was me. I mean, there was very little acting required in playing Chuck. I was kind of nerdy, gawky, video game playing guy who really loves people and loves his family and genuinely wants to be a hero in this world and wants to do good in this world and utilize whatever platform and privilege I have to do that. And I feel like Chuck did that all the time. And again, it was very little acting involved. Very, very little acting. It was mostly just me showing up and being myself with words that somebody else gave me. But I think even Shazam, there's a lot of me in Shazam too. It's slightly different because he's a 15-year-old deep down in there, but I'm kind of a 15-year-old deep down in here too. So yeah, but Chuck probably for sure. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
You got some commentary in the background.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Yeah.
Producers, directors over there.
Yeah.
So, you were also in Psych the movie.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another one of my favorite movies. And so I was just wondering if you have any like fun stories or memories from filming.
Yeah, I mean, that whole group of folks is really special. And I had met Dule years ago, I think when I was doing Chuck, but I met him years ago and just in passing, and he was so lovely and so kind, and we kind of kept in touch a little. And then I was doing this event that I would do during San Diego Comic-Con called Nerd HQ, and I would do these panels called Conversations for a Cause. And we were able to get the boys from Psych down there, partly through the help of Dule. And I met James and I met Steve and Chris and everyone, and they were so delightful. They were there almost every year, doing a panel for us every year, raising money for Operation Smile every year, and bringing so much joy to the fans. And they genuinely care about people and making great product. And my biggest memory is just I was delighted that I finally got to work with them. They tried to actually write me into the musical episode of Psych, which is why there's a character named Z in the episode, but I couldn't do it because I was playing Fandral the Dashing in the Thor movies at the time. But finally getting to Vancouver and being a part of the movie, I think maybe fun memory is James had called me early on and said, "Hey man, what are you doing in May or whatever this year?" Is earlier in the year. And I was like, "I don't know. I think I might be free. What's going on?" And he said, "I think we have a role for you in this Psych the movie. And it's based on David Bowie's The Thin White Duke character that he had put together with, strawberry blonde hair and the whole nine." Now, I can't do a good David Bowie impersonation, but I can do an English accent. All right. So I thought, well, can I do it English? And they were like, yeah, maybe, Steve and James, who are kind of co-writing and whatnot, they're like, yeah, but we'll think about it. We'll kick it around. I mean, I was like, no, I really want to do it English. And they're like, yeah, well, we'll think about it. Well, I didn't let them think about it. I just showed up in Vancouver, and as soon as I got off the plane, I wouldn't stop talking in an English accent. It didn't matter where we were, on set, off set. I was just making it very clear, this is what you're getting, So if you want the Thin White Duke and you want me to play him, that's how I'm going to talk the entire time. And I did. Literally never broke character, never broke accent, was always talking like this. And so eventually, after day 2 of rehearsal or, wardrobe fitting or whatever, they were like, fine, we relent, whatever, fine, do whatever you want to do. So I was like, yes! And then that's what I did. And that's why I was English in it.
Cool. So you're an ambassador for the nonprofit Active Minds,
yeah,
which brings mental health awareness to college students. What made you want to be involved with this organization?
So I used to be an ambassador, and I still am kind of an honorary ambassador for Operation Smile, which I think is a tremendous organization, and I'd be remiss not to bring them up because I have been working with them for many years. And for anyone out there who might watch this, and for yourself included, they're a wonderful organization that brings free surgical care and resources to 80 different cities around the world in developing countries, primarily offering children, but also adults, cleft lip, cleft palate, oral surgeries, reparations, and things of that nature. They're tremendous, and I was very honored to work with them for a long time. But then in 2017, after having gone to some therapy here and there for some things that I needed to work through in my life, I ended up in a very, very, very dark place, and I had to go and basically dive into this sleepaway camp kind of deal where for 3 weeks I had to really do a lot of reprogramming of my own mind, things that I thought were true of myself or true of the world or how I fit into the world that were untrue. And not for any fault of my own, as I came to find out. It's because we all, we learn from our parents and our family and our schools and our societies and communities in the world. We are all being programmed. Like our brains are all and hearts are these little computers. And whether we want it or not, or whether the people who are programming our hearts and brains know it or not, they are being programmed. And so I came to some very, very deep revelations and things that quite honestly saved my life. I was in such despair, such darkness, that I really didn't want to live anymore. That was only 3 years ago. That was after doing a lot of things that a lot of other people would have looked at and said, oh, wow, you've made it. Look at this career that you have and these TV shows and movies that you've gotten to do. And yet all of it felt kind of worthless. It all felt like none of it had brought me any closer to feeling happiness or worth in the world. And little did I know the reason why was because I didn't ultimately love myself. I didn't know what self-love even was. I didn't know what it meant to truly value myself. And I learned in those 3 weeks of very intensive, life-changing, life-saving therapy about self-love, about self-care, about trauma, about how the people who abuse us in our lives, they themselves have been abused. They themselves have suffered trauma at the hands of someone else. And that person who abused them was traumatized, and so on and so forth. You can go all the way down the chain to trauma that started thousands and thousands of years ago, that's generationally been handed down over and over and over again. And instead of us being able to see that and recognize that and put a stop to it, we end up, even though we think we're going to do better than the people who might have abused us, we end up acting out of our abuse and being abusive in our own right and handing that farther down. So for me to understand, to really dig deep into all of that and really start loving myself for the first time, and then also realizing, I think, just how many people don't know what it means to love themselves. They don't know what trauma has done to them and how they are themselves traumatizing outside of themselves because of that, and the amount of empathy that I think we don't afford ourselves and each other because it's not our fault. There's a great movie called Good Will Hunting, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But the late Robin Williams, who also I think is a great example of someone who was very successful and such a bright light in this world, and yet struggled so deeply with his own mental and emotional health. Getting emotional again. Happens to me often, but there's a scene in that. He plays a psychiatrist, and there's a scene with Matt Damon where he says to Matt Damon, who's struggling in his own mental and emotional health, he says, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault." And to realize that, and to realize that we all have to have grace with ourselves, and we have to have grace with each other. We have to be able to see each other as the 5-year-old child that's in one another. That 5-year-old child that didn't know better, that was learning, unfortunately, incorrect behaviors, incorrect thought patterns, abusive thought patterns. That's where it all starts in our childhood. I realized that I don't think most of the world knows this. And I also think that almost all of the problems that we have in the world can all be rooted back down to a broken mind or a broken heart. Wars and racism and poverty and homelessness and climate change and anything and everything, all of the ways that you look at now, right now on social media, where people are at each other's necks and there's so much vitriol and there's so much hate and there's so much, because it's all coming out of fear. It's all coming out of bad mental and emotional programming that people don't even realize that they have. And if we can help to heal those people, well, then they can start looking at themselves and other people with grace and and kindness and forgiveness. So that's why I couldn't not. I felt like it was. I start talking about these things and I always get teary. Because I care.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to make you cry.
No, don't apologize. Oh, please. You're one in a long list that's made me cry. But I think that there was nothing more important that I could think of But particularly if I thought that all of these other initiatives in the world, ones that, by the way, are all very valiant and people ought to be volunteering their time and their resources and their money and energy toward, I really did feel very convinced that if we can fix the root problem, which is everyone's heart and mind, then all of those other things would be solved. I want to go upstream. I want to go to the source of where all of this is. And I felt like it was my duty and my responsibility as someone who walked through that fire to come back with pails of water to help those who are still on fire, you know? And then in my search of trying to find what was a good mental health initiative or organization, and there are many, I don't know, I read about Active Minds and it just resonated with me so deeply because their goal primarily, or let's say their specificity in the world, is to try and give and provide mental health resources and education on as many college and high school campuses as they can within the United States and then even internationally. And I think that is probably the best place to start. I think we need to start with young, active minds. If we can get to kids where they're in these very formative years of their life, where, you know, they may have come up in a household where their parents, whether their parents knew it or not, I'm sure their parents were trying to do the best they could. And I really do. I personally believe that all of our parents are, but our parents are unaware sometimes of the lessons that they're not able to give us or the bad lessons that they are giving us. And when a child is kind of getting into high school and then into college years, they're really starting to become their own adult. They're starting to become their own person. And that is exactly the time, I think, where if they haven't already received good programming or good reprogramming, it's that moment, I think, that we need to seize and help them to see things a little more clearly. I'll use racism as an example. I think it's, obviously very now, the things that we're talking about and we're dealing with in this country. I don't believe, and almost anyone that I've ever read that understands it will agree, racism is not, you're not born into racism. You are taught into racism. And there are children that don't know better because their parents didn't know better. Their parents grew up in a world where their parents were telling them, hey, this person of a different color or a different, culture, or what, you should be afraid of them. They're not good people. Well, if you're a child growing up in that home, you don't know better. You're trusting your parents. Your parents are the end all of what is true. We all, even if our parents are abusive, you don't really know it when you're a kid. You're just kind of going, you think this is normal. So a child doesn't really understand how to challenge incorrect thoughts that are being handed to them by their incorrectly thinking parents. So to be able to get to them in high school and in college and say, hey, you've heard it said that a person of another color is someone to fear. Well, let us help you understand something different, which is that's not the case. And more than that, you don't have to hate your parents to disagree with your parents. I think a lot of people are very afraid to challenge the programming, the lessons that they receive from their parents, because they feel like, well, if I disagree with my parents, well, then I'm not loving my parents. And I think we need to help people understand that you can love someone wholly and completely disagree with them. You can think that their life is just as valuable as any other life on the planet and still actually not even like them very much. Because love is not amplified like. Love is to acknowledge the life that is within each and every one of us, each and every animal, each and every blade of grass and tree and daisy and fish in the ocean and deer in the meadow. That is to appreciate that, to acknowledge that. There's a word in certain cultures, and one that you use at the end of yoga practice, that's namaste, which means the light in me recognizes the light in you. We can recognize the light in one another and still not actually like each other and still not agree with one another. And we live in a world now where that's all become very muddy. People don't understand that you can love someone and value their life and completely not want to vote the way that they vote. You could even be concerned with the way someone votes or thinks or any of that. But to allow that to start working around in your head and in your heart and turning you against someone, to harden your heart against them, to start making you dehumanize that other person, or to turn them into a villain or a monster in your mind or your heart. That's where we need to do a lot of work. That's what's going on right now, and it's scary. That scares me, and it breaks my heart, because I think if we all saw each other again as the 5-year-old child in each and every one of us, there's a 5-year-old child in Donald Trump. There's a 5-year-old child in Barack Obama. There's a 5-year-old child in you and in me and in Chris and your family. There's a 5-year-old child in your neighbors. There's a 5-year-old child in every single person in this on this planet. And when they were 5, they were not jaded. They were not bent. They were not broken. They were still innocent. They had all of the possibility in the world to become almost anyone or anything that they could dream of. But because of the surroundings that they were in, the environment that they were raised in, that is so much of why they became what they did. We have to be able to acknowledge that. You don't have to agree. You don't have to say, well, that's okay, and they were raised the way that they were raised, and so it's perfectly okay for them to behave the way that they do. If it's destructive to other people, we don't have to agree with that. But we must remember to not become the monsters that we are trying to vanquish in the process. That is more and more people are allowing themselves and justifying their hatred, because they think, well, my hatred will somehow squash out this worse hatred or this worse enemy that I see in front of me. But we know through Martin Luther King and scripture and all manner of other wise people, far wiser than me, who have been around far longer than me, that hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can. So, yeah.
That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So, what do you do when you're having a bad day?
Well, prayer is very helpful for me. I think, a mantra of mine, a thing that I repeat. Well, I repeat a lot of things in my prayers. I used to not, because I used to think that if I'm just being repetitive, then I'm not speaking from my heart. But then I realized through my prayer and meditative practices that you can absolutely be very repetitive with what you say, and you can mean every word of it. And sometimes in that repetition, you can find more meaning in it, because you are forcing yourself to really acknowledge the words that you continue to say. And one of those mantras is humility, gratitude, and trust. And I think that if we can exercise those things, if we can humble ourselves to one another, if we can humble ourselves to the great expanse of the unknown. Some people call it God. Some people call it the universe. Some people call it the great energy. Whatever you want to call it, I think it's all the same thing. I call it God. But I think if you can humble yourself to that, realizing that the world, the history, that reality as you know it is not about you. We're a part of it. And your specific life is about you. Absolutely. And we have to acknowledge that our life is ours to tend to, that our garden is ours to tend to, and no one else can do that for us. We have to do the work on us. But then acknowledge that everyone else's work is not yours to work on. Be humble enough to know that it's not your place to go make other people do or think as they ought to. You can lead by example, but to humble yourself to know that it is not necessarily your job to go and tell other people what to do. And humble yourself to know that it is not other people's job to revolve their lives or this world around you. We all have problems. We all have issues. We all have brokenness in us. We are all of us fighting a fight on some level. And we have to recognize that everyone's fighting a fight and I think therefore be gracious and kind and patient with one another. But we also can't expect everyone else to drop their whole life in order to accommodate our whims and accommodate what we believe to be more important needs than other people's. That is not okay. So humility, that's number one. It is a great equalizer and calming, I think, of your heart and mind to realize that, yes, you have problems. You have things that you are struggling with. And so does everyone else. And there are other things going on in the world. And more than that, humble yourself to history. Humble yourself to the fact that we are, in the grand scheme of all that is and all that ever was and all that will be, we are infinitely small specks of sand that make up a mosaic made up of an infinitely large mosaic made up of infinitely small specks of sand. It seems, and some people find that to be depressing. I actually find it to be very freeing, because the world is not about us. The success of the world is not resting on our shoulders. Whether or not this planet continues on, it will take all of us working together. So we are involved in it. But the pressures that we put on ourselves to somehow work beyond what we are called to do, which is to do the work on ourselves first and foremost, I think there's a lot of humility, a lot of peace that can be found in that humility. So that's one. Two, gratitude. This is something that's people talk about all the time, and I can't reiterate enough. You will never be happy. You will never feel joy if you cannot find gratitude with what you have currently. If you are always seeking the next thing or the next thing or the next thing, and then finally you will be happy. This is one of my biggest issues with where we've, I think, allowed ourselves to get to as a society, particularly in Western culture. And I'll just use the American dream, but I think it's kind of the Western dream, the Western culture dream, which is if I can marry the right person and have the right amount of kids and live in the right house in the right neighborhood with the right amount of toys and the right amount of money and the right job, and we go on the right amount of vacations and we have all the right amount of everything, well, then finally I'll be happy. Well, that's a big, dumb lie. It's a big, dumb lie that we've all been complicit in. We've all been marching toward that. And unfortunately in that, as we march toward our individual goal, what it does is it separates all of us from one another. We have lost community. We don't even know what it means to know and trust our neighbors anymore. How old are you?
17.
17. So you've grown up in a world that has had very little community. When I was growing up as a kid, before cell phones and smartphones and internet and all that, you knew your neighbors. Your neighbors knew you. If I was out past a certain time, my neighbors would be like, Zach, why aren't you home? Not what goes on now, which is you're all disconnected. You're all on your phones. You're all in your room. You're all playing your video games. Nobody knows each other. We've taken our elderly and we've stuck them into homes, so they're not even the neighborhood watch that they used to be anymore. And I'm not, by the way, that's not an indictment of anyone who has to put their elderly family member into a place for them to be taken care of, because not everybody has the means or time to be able to do that. But the point is, in all of that, and forgive me, I can get very verbose and tangential. I think that it's important that we are grateful for what we have, and that starts with being grateful for this thing, this meat bag that we walk around in. We only get one, unless reincarnation is real. Then we might get it a couple of times. I don't know, but I'm not banking on that. I don't know what lies beyond the Great Divide. All I know is I'm here right now, and this is amazing. It's a miracle. It really is, and we don't teach our kids that enough. We don't teach our kids that they are the miracle, not Animal Farm or Animal Crossing, not a Nintendo Switch, not Twitch or YouTube or Instagram. Sure, they're all cool. They're all cool things. But if they're taking away from you understanding that you are the miracle, that you've got this amazing thing that we ought to take care of. We need to feed well. We need to exercise and move and exercise our minds and our hearts and our bodies and keep them as healthy and as strong as we can. So starting with that gratitude, that daily gratitude, and then going into all the simple things, the air that you breathe, the food that you eat, the water that you drink, the family and the friends that you have around you. The fact that you live in a place right now with a roof over your head and clean drinking water. I don't believe that we ought to go and live in a lot of guilt and shame that some people end up doing. Some people, they go and they try to find perspective and context, and they see that there are people in other countries that are starving. And then they look at their own issues and they start beating themselves up going, oh, what are my issues? They're so dumb. I don't think we should do that either. We're all entitled to reflect upon and acknowledge the things that we are struggling with in our own life. And that could be that, you own a very nice car and someone broke into it and stole some stuff. Sure, that's not nearly as, let's say, life-threatening as somebody in Africa who doesn't have clean water to drink. You can't deny the issues or the things that are going on in your life, but I always encourage people to still use context and perspective to at least give themselves enough distance from their current problem to acknowledge that, not that it's not an issue, not that it's not a problem, but there are greater problems that they are not also dealing with. So to wake up, to feel even our broken bodies. I look at people who are paraplegics, quadriplegics, and or born without legs or arms, and they figure out how to live life. I've seen, I'm sure you've seen them too, amazing videos of people with no arms, and they are like girls who have learned to put on their makeup with their feet, have learned to cook and drive and write and all of the things. They can do it with just their feet. And talk about a smack in the face. And I go, I've had these two arms and hands my whole life. I take them for granted all the time. And then all of a sudden you ever like jam your finger and you try to go tie your shoelaces, and even losing one digit somehow makes that like an impossible task. And you go, wow, just this one finger I've been taking for granted. Imagine taking both of your limbs or all of your limbs for granted, for that matter, So I think gratitude, humility and gratitude, and then ultimately trust. This becomes a more difficult one for people who aren't, let's say, of a more spiritual persuasion, but I would encourage them to even trust in, let's say, the magic of the science of the universe. We know that energy is a real thing. We know that the energy that flows through us is called life. The energy that flows through animals and plants is called life. And that's something we still haven't been able to fully figure out. We don't know where that miracle started and where it's heading. And I think to the extent that we can be humble to that we can be grateful for that, and that we should trust in that. Trust that if you are being humble and grateful to that it will lead you where you need to be led. And maintaining, and what I pray for beyond those things is that I would be used in this world and in this life for the betterment of all. I think that if you really are trusting in that, and you want that, if you want to be the best you that you can be, and used to the highest levels that you can be utilized in this reality, and you can trust in that, it pays dividends every single time. It pays dividends.
That's beautiful again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to need a few days to think about this interview, I think, Maya, for sure. These are like the most substantive answers we've ever had on your show. So thank you, Zachary.
My pleasure. I don't know how to answer these questions any other way. So yeah, happy to.
I feel like I just listened to a motivational speech. It's awesome.
Yes, thank you.
So if you could have any song playing to announce your entrance into a room, what song would it be?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question. I don't know. You stumped me. I have never thought of that. I'm not the type of person that likes to be announced with a big fanfare, to be honest. I think it's way cooler to just come in. So I've never really thought about it. Like if I was a sports like an athlete going into a game, like what would be or like a boxer or something? I don't know. I think, to be honest, it would probably just be something goofy and funny, because I don't like the self-aggrandizement of it. I would like to just I'd like to disarm people and make them laugh. So I don't know, something very ironic, like Christina Aguilera's Genie in a Bottle or something like that. Like something that nobody's expecting. Like your boxer coming in. If you want to be with me, I don't know, like something.
So my last question for you is, who do you consider to be a real life superhero, and why?
Well, I think, to me, all of the superheroes are people who have been people who have overcome great adversity for any number of reasons, and have not only overcome the diversity or the adversity, but have done it without allowing the adversity to take their light and their purpose away from them. And more than that, use the adversity as a platform to change the adversity. Those, to me, are the superheroes, are the heroes of the world. And there are many of them. There are many people who recognize, and I think this goes back to the mental health aspect. It's recognizing that those who are creating the adversity that you might be going through are unaware of it. And if they are aware of it, they're not fully aware of it. They're not fully aware of, let's say, the impact that it's having on your or other people's lives. They have been programmed incorrectly to be unaware of the damage that they do. And so to always hold grace for them, to not be hardened by their fear and their ignorance and their anger and their hate, but rather see them as people who are lost within that same adversity, just on the other side of it, and to fight against the adversity that they put out, but never allow it to harden your heart to them. I think Martin Luther King was a great example of that. I think he, like everyone, we're all flawed and we're all human, so none of us are perfect. But the amount of things that I have heard or rather read that he has said, Gandhi. I think that there are quite a few people who have walked this earth and have understood that to live by the sword is to die by the sword. And right now we don't fight with swords; we fight with words. And a lot of people are swinging their word swords around, trying to kill other people. And people like Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and many others understood that if you do all that, then you're not ultimately changing the system. You're not fixing the problem. You are just perpetuating it. You are replacing the irresponsible power with your own irresponsible power. And I look to those who can see through the hate, see through the darkness, and still love and still reach through it and pull people up through it. Yeah, those are heroes to me.
Yeah, I like that.
Me too. Yeah. Well, I think that's our time, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maya, thank you so much. Thank you for asking me such deep and lovely questions. I am honored to be on your show. Thank you to everybody at the Seacrest Studios there in Colorado and really all around the nation. This is the third time I've gotten to interact with you guys. I'm just grateful every time. And to all of your family, Maya's family in there, thank you for helping set all this up. Yay. And a big thanks to Skylar Astin for being such a mensch and getting it all together and sending you guys so much love and so much light. And I hope that you continue to stay as safe and sane as you can in all of this, this very turbulent time that we're in. But time I'm hoping and I'm trying to believe that is really just the growing pains, the birth pangs that are going to lead us to a better world for everybody.
So true.
Eloquent.
Yeah.
You are amazing.
You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.